12 reasons not to get married. Reason number 1. It kills your sex life. Maybe not at first, but it does eventually. Why? 2 words. Coolidge effect. Now, there's a funny story about Calvin Coolidge, who was the President of the United States back in the 1920s, and at the time the US government was getting more directly involved with farming on an experimental basis, and the President and the First Lady were being shown around one of these experimental government farms in Kentucky, and they were being shown around separately by the farmhands that work there. When the First Lady came to the chicken coop, she noticed that a rooster was mating with a hen very vigorously and with tremendous enthusiasm, and she looked on and gave an envious sigh, forlornly remembering the early days of her own marriage when her own husband was quite so enthusiastic. So she asked the farmhand, how often does that rooster put on such a vigorous performance? Oh, many times a day, sometimes dozens of times a day, actually, replied the farmhand. The First Lady smiled and said, Really? Dozens of times a day, huh? Make sure you tell the President that when he comes by. So, a little later, the President does come by, and the farmhand does tell him that, and on being told, President Coolidge thought for a moment, and he asked, Same hen every time? Farmhand replied, Oh no, Mr. President, it's a different hen every time, to which the President smiled, and he said, You tell the First Lady that. Now, the Coolidge effect is not just about this cute little story or funny little joke. The Coolidge effect is a documented phenomena in sexual biology that has been studied by sexual biologists and has been proven to be true. The Coolidge effect basically states that there will be a continued high level of sexual interest, enthusiasm, and performance levels when new sexual partners are available. And of course, the Coolidge effect also states that the lack of sexual variety over an extended period of time leads to a decline in the amount of enthusiasm, performance, and general interest in sex. The Coolidge effect has been observed, tested, scientifically documented, and proven to be true on every single mammal that it has been tested on, including human beings. Human beings are not designed to breed in captivity. Reason number 2. You will be taken for granted. Now, I know what you're thinking. I love my partner, I'd never take them for granted, and they would never take me for granted either. Well, guess what you do when you get married? You grant yourselves to each other. Not figuratively, literally. You are granting yourselves to each other in perpetuity on an exclusive basis. In fact, if you're saying to yourself, well, I want to get married, but I don't want to be taken for granted, then what you're really saying is, I want to grant myself to someone, but I don't want to be taken for granted when that happens, which is a contradiction in terms. It's a complete impossibility. Why do you think it is that there are only 2 kinds of ring known to man to have magical powers? The ring from the Lord of the Rings trilogy, famous for its fearsome power of command, and wedding rings, which are famous for their fearsome weight gain powers. And it's not hard to see why. Weakened motivation for maintaining body weight is due to participants feeling like they've already snagged their partner, and they no longer need to work on their appearance. The sexy lingerie goes out of the window too. In short, marriage actively promotes complacency. Reason 3. It's monstrously selfish. Conventional husband-wife relationships involve both parties agreeing to fence in not just their own sexuality, but also the sexuality of their partner, to the exclusion of every other single person on the entire planet. Well, that's the ultimate zero-sum game, isn't it? For you to win, everyone else on the entire planet has to lose. How selfish. Society's way of thinking about this is very odd in that aspect, because the conventional way of thinking likes to imply that those with more than one partner are being greedy. But what they fail to grasp is that people who do not like the idea of being someone else's sexual property and don't want to fence in their own sexuality or their partners are not playing a zero-sum game. They know that love is not a finite resource. They don't have the scarcity mentality, the starvation mentality, and the selfishness that marriage promotes. They have an abundance mentality. It's not hard to understand if you take sex out of the equation. Imagine if you're in a restaurant and there's a family at one of the tables and a surprise birthday cake is produced for the 10-year-old child at the table. If that child then went around the room offering other people a slice of the birthday cake, you would look on and you'd comment about what a generous and well-mannered young man he was. However, if you saw one or two of the children run off to the corner and scoff the cake all by themselves and tell everybody else that they can't have any, you know what you would think. How monstrously selfish. Reason number 4. It's an insane bet. When you get married, you are making a bet. You and your partner are both saying, I will bet you that between now and either my death or your death, that I will never have sex with another person and neither will you. What are the stakes of this bet? Only the entire relationship. When you make that bet, the chances are you've already signed a death warrant on your relationship, but you just don't know it yet. Not only is that an insane bet, it is the only bet that you would ever be prepared to place in your entire life in which the cost of losing the bet only increases year after year after year after year, and yet at the same time, the chances of you losing the bet also increases year after year after year. That's insane! Reason number 5. It kills love. Love is a temporary insanity curable by marriage. Marriage motivates people the wrong way in relationships. Anyone who's studied human motivation on even a basic level will be familiar with concepts like intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic means being motivated to do something by some internal desire, and extrinsic means motivated by some external reward or promise, something that resides outside the self. Examples of intrinsic motivation in relationships includes things like attraction, desire, sex, and love. Extrinsic motivation in relationships include things like getting that ring on your finger, the respect that you think marriage will bring, the security that you think marriage will bring, getting married because you want to have a baby. All those things are external. The overjustification effect is a finding uncovered by psychologists in the 1970s, and it's been demonstrated and proven to be true in many different settings and studies conducted since then. Basically, it means that when someone is engaged in some situation for purely intrinsic reasons, doing it just for the love of it, for example, and an extrinsic reward is then introduced, not only does it undermine their intrinsic desire and cause their focus to shift to the extrinsic reward, but even more worryingly, when the extrinsic reward is no longer provided, the initial intrinsic desire never returns. This is a fairly common death spiral in many marriages because when this happens, if external rewards are no longer being offered, interest in the relationship is lost. Any intrinsic motivation that was there before does not return. In other words, external rewards must be continuously offered as motivation to sustain the relationship, and failure to provide them will often result in anger towards the other party. And this is how marriage kills love. Reason 6. Marriage is founded on fear and run on the basis of reduced autonomy. One of the odd things about fear is the way it can cause us to surrender our autonomy. A key part of the human spirit is a desire for autonomy, a desire for freedom. Entire wars are fought on the basis of it. We literally fight and die for autonomy. Entire countries are founded on the principles of autonomy. Every single country that celebrates an Independence Day, which is almost all countries, are celebrating exactly this, successfully achieving autonomy. As you can see from this graphic, this is global. So we know that the desire for autonomy is innately human and cuts across every single geographical, cultural, ethnic, and linguistic barrier. Yet consider this. We are born into a world in which the less autonomy and freedom that you have in your sexual relationships, the more society legitimizes and praises you and regards your relationship as more real. It goes on a sliding scale from greatest autonomy to zero autonomy that looks like this. Greatest autonomy, single. You are regarded with pity by society. Never mind, you'll find someone special one day. High autonomy, one night stand. That's not even regarded as a relationship of any kind. In fact, it's often seen as the opposite of a relationship, as demonstrated by questions like, so, with you and him, was it just a one-night stand, or do you think there's a relationship there? Notice the wording, it's either a one-night stand or a relationship. Slightly less autonomy, starting to date someone. Not officially boyfriend-girlfriend yet, but dating each other, perhaps exclusively, perhaps not. Seen as more legitimate than a one-night stand, but not that much more, especially if you're not dating on an exclusive basis. But it's at least seen as a relationship of some kind, not quite a real one just yet. Even less autonomy, dating exclusively. Okay, now society says that it's a real relationship. You have agreed to fence in each other's sexuality on an exclusive basis, and you may now officially start to berate other people and get into fights in bars and nightclubs. Oi, were you chatting up my bird? Hey girl, you stay away from my man. Congratulations, you are now officially someone else's property. But wait, there's something missing. What is it? Oh yeah, I got to get you a ring so everyone else knows that we have an arrangement and knows to stay the hell away from you. Engagement, almost no autonomy. You pop the question of course being, will you please surrender what little autonomy you have until one of us dies? Except we don't say it like that, do we? That would be too unromantic, so we call it marriage instead. Zero autonomy. Well done, you've now made someone swear in front of God that they have no autonomy, and that they won't back out of the deal no matter what happens. Reason 7. Marriage does not make things more stable. Marriage is based on the notion of sexual ownership. It's built into the foundation of the relationship. The problem with that is the notion of sexual ownership actively promotes jealousy and possessiveness. Once you and your partners have fenced in each other's sexuality in this manner, well, fences need to be patrolled, don't they? Can't have anyone hopping over the fence, after all. This turns some couples into amateur sleuths. Who is he talking to? Why is she looking at him like that? Where are you right now? Who are you with? What time are you coming home? Whose hair is this? You really think all of this helps to stabilize your relationship? What about checking your partner's text messages or emails and then getting into arguments about what you find? How does that make things more stable? Reason 8. It's disempowering. I married you because of the way you make me feel. Now, the offices of marriage counselors all over the world are full to the brim with people who are feeling shitty and who are convinced that it is the fault of their partner that they feel this way. When you say, I feel bad and it's your fault, it is fundamentally and completely disempowering. What you're saying is that the locus of control for how you feel is not within me, it's within you. When you do this, you may as well hand a remote control over to your partner and say, okay, you control me now. You control how I feel because I don't want to be responsible for my own feelings. If human beings were meant to be controlled, we'd come with a remote. Reason 9. It's not natural. There are 8.7 million species on the planet, of which we are one, and we're the only ones that get married. Therefore, we've been outvoted on the question of whether marriage is natural or not by 8.7 million to 1. Bit of a landslide vote there. By the way, if you're thinking, oh, but I saw that nature documentary that one time and they said that certain species of bird or prairie vole stayed together for life. Well, that's not the same thing as marriage, is it? You don't see prairie voles legally handcuff themselves to each other in front of a priest, and you never see prairie voles squandering precious survival resources in bitter divorce court proceedings. Reason 10. It's based on a lack of trust. As one of my favorite characters in my favorite TV show once said, you don't need to make formal alliances with people you trust. In other words, marriage is built on the idea that to protect yourself and advance your agenda, the best way to do it is through exercise of coercive power. Marriage is fundamentally about creating an obligation between two people, And as Wayne Dyer pointed out, relationships based on obligation lack dignity. How can we pretend that it's not based on coercion and obligation when marriage involves two people legally handcuffing themselves to each other to prevent the other one from leaving, should they wish to do so? Like all handcuffs, it has a key, but it's a very expensive one, as anyone who's been divorced will tell you, which brings us on to our next point. Reason 11. It's expensive. According to Rate Supermarket, the price tag of a conventional one-year courtship, followed by a one-year engagement to the wedding day, comes in at more than $43,800. As for divorce, the average cost of a contested divorce in the USA ranges from $15,000 to $30,000, and that's just on the legal fees. A UK survey showed that the typical couple spends even more than that, more than £43,900. If you're a guy, it can often cost you your home, access to the kids, and 50% of your entire net worth on top of that. Even if you do get the home and the kids, a great amount of wealth that should be passed down to your kids gets wasted on expensive divorce lawyers. Great for them, an eye-watering waste of money for the rest of us. Reason number 12. It does not work anyway. 50% of marriages end in divorce, and the 50% divorce rate is not a little-known statistic. It's a very widely known statistic. But it's even worse than that. 80% of second marriages end in divorce. Now, if 50% of the trains that left your local train station derailed and came off the track, and 80% of the replacement trains that came along to do the rescue did the exact same thing, would you be buying a train ticket anytime soon? But let's take a look at the 50% that do stay married. According to sexologist and New York Times #1 best-selling author Dr. Lara Berman, of the 50% that stay married in the long term, 80% of those report being sexually unsatisfied in their marriages, and of those 80%, 60% of those marriages were considered clinically sexually dead. Take a long, hard look at this chart. 90% misery or divorce or dissatisfaction. It does not work. Imagine you're the CEO of a company like Sony or Apple, and your engineers tell you that one of your consumer electronics products has a failure rate that looks like this. Would you think that that was totally okay, or would you issue an immediate product recall and make sure that this problem is fixed? We need to do that recall. We need to get this problem fixed. We need a new model, a new way of relating that has to be different. We need something that works. To check out what the hell I'm talking about and see more videos like this, either point your web browser here or click on one of the notes that you see appear on your screen right now.